Terror attacks in New Orleans and Las Vegas to start the new year, plus President-elect Donald Trump's plan to deport millions of undocumented migrants. Hello, I'm Mike Walter, sitting in for Anna Naidu, and this is The Heat. The FBI is investigating an early Wednesday attack in New Orleans that killed 14 people. A U.S. Army veteran drove a pickup truck into a crowd celebrating the new year. The driver posted videos on social media hours before saying he was inspired by ISIS. For more, we turn to CGTN's Alistair Baverstock. He's in New Orleans. Alistair, what more can you tell us about the suspect and this investigation at this stage?
Well, good evening, Mike, where Bourbon Street is now back open in New Orleans following this attack. And what we know about this assailant is his name, to start with, Shamsuddin Jabbar. He is a U.S. citizen, born and raised in Houston, Texas, and as you mentioned, a military veteran. He served from 2007 to 2015 in working in human resources, recruitment and IT, and was honorably discharged as a sergeant in 2015. His personal life, however, a bit more complicated. 3 children from 2 marriages, both of which ended in divorce. The second divorce quite acrimonious, and he was then suspended from seeing his own children. Despite his name, Jabbar, he was not necessarily, we believe, raised within the Muslim religion, but rather converted to Islam later on in life, possibly as an adult, but those details aren't exactly clear at the moment. But it does appear that after this second acrimonious divorce that he has been gone under the radar, rather disappeared from life socially, and it may have been during that period that he was radicalized under the ISIS flag. So that's what we know so far. Details will continue to come out.
Indeed they will, and of course, hours after the New Orleans attack, an active duty U.S. Army soldier died when his rented Tesla Cybertruck packed with explosives detonated outside President-elect Donald Trump's Las Vegas hotel. What do we know about that investigation, which is underway now as well?
Well, that's quite right, Mike. This is about Matthew Livelsberger, a highly decorated Green Beret from the U.S. Army who took a Cybertruck loaded to the brim with fireworks, parked it in front of the Trump Tower in Las Vegas, and detonated those fireworks and shot himself in the head just before the explosion. These Cybertrucks, as electric vehicles, have lithium batteries inside them weighing more than 700 kilograms, and once one of those is ignited, as it was in front of Trump Tower, those burn very bright and very, very hot, as we can see from the images which have emerged from that. It does not appear that these two events are related, given that the FBI has stated that Jabbar here in New Orleans did act alone. But when it comes to that Las Vegas attack, it was only Livelsberger himself, the assailant, who died. Others have sustained minor injuries and no damage to Trump Tower itself whatsoever to speak of. However, the FBI have said that the symbolism of this, a Tesla truck in front of Trump Tower being incinerated, given that Elon Musk runs Tesla, who's become something of a political figure more recently given the political election. That symbolism is not lost on the FBI. So a very difficult start to the year in both cities here in the United States, Mike.
Thanks so much, Alistair. Alistair Baverstock reporting for us from New Orleans. There's a lot to get to, so let's get right to our panel. Douglas Sloan is a Democratic strategist and a principal with the National Capital Strategy Group. Jadan Horyn is a political analyst and commentator. Also with us right here in the studio is Rafael Bernal. He covers politics for The Hill, and Eric Bolling is a best-selling author and also the host of Bolling, the Bolling podcast. And he's joining us from Florida. Eric, they don't believe that these are connected. We also They don't believe that there's any other people involved in the New Orleans attack. Alistair talked about the symbolism, though, Trump and Musk with the Tesla attack. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. Kind of happy New Year, if you can say that, in 2025 to the folks. So the FBI came out originally and said there was no other terror. This wasn't a terror attack. The mayor and the governor of Louisiana, mayor of New Orleans, both said it may be. I'm not ready to make that conclusion yet. There's a lot of information that's still happening, including as we speak right now. There's a building on fire in the French Quarter at this moment. They don't know what the source of it is. There's a truck, an 18-wheeler, being isolated on I-85 in South Carolina, threat of a bomb threat on this 18-wheeler on a very, very busy highway. A plane crashes into a building in California. Are they related? I don't know. The trucks that were rented, both were rented trucks, both the New Orleans truck and the Las Vegas truck, both were rented from the same kind of an Airbnb type rental place, Turo, but very odd. The first truck in New Orleans had been sold 20 separate times. I'm not ready to believe anything I hear yet. I think there's a lot more information that could maybe link the two together. Here's what I will say, and this is probably going to, light the panel on fire. But these things didn't happen for the 4 years Donald Trump was in office. They happened under Barack Obama. ISIS was thriving under the 8 years of Barack Obama. I cannot tell you how many actual videos of beheaded Americans and beheaded people, innocent people that ISIS showed us. I watched them. That stopped. Donald Trump came in office and he put his foot down and said, "You mess around, you're going to get punched back." Syria got punched back. Others got punched back. I personally cannot wait for January 20th when he puts his foot down again and says, "Enough of the shenanigans, terrorists. You're going to get hurt if you do this to Americans."
Some might say, though, that there was an attack that occurred during his presidency on January 6th here at the Capitol.
Well, that was after he was beaten by Joe Biden, which I clearly am saying he lost that election. And as we've discussed many, many times, he didn't incite that. He said peacefully go over there and march. And frankly, no one died of that, guys. No one died. I mean, you're going to say a police officer died of a heart attack. Someone died later. The only person who died was Ashley Babbitt, who was shot by a Capitol Hill police officer or FBI. I can't remember which one of the two shot, but she was the only casualty there. We got 15 at least people dead in New Orleans. The guy in the truck in Las Vegas, it's been reported. I don't know if you're reporting or not, but it's been reported there was a gunshot to his head. How do you light an explosive, a bomb, and then have time to kill yourself before you something is very fishy in the Las Vegas reporting right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, and as you said, the details will keep coming in over the days ahead. Douglas, let me ask you about this. Both suspects, as we said, U.S. citizens, both served in the military. One active duty, the other retired from the military. But Donald Trump, shortly after the attack, the president-elect asserted that this was basically following the New Orleans attack, that it proved the need for a crackdown on immigration. He posted this on Truth Social. This is what happens when you have open borders with weak, ineffective, and virtually non-existent leadership. This despite the fact, of course, that the perpetrator was a U.S. citizen. He also called on the CIA to get involved, even though their mission is foreign rather than domestic intelligence. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, I'd like to very quickly take issue with Eric Bolling getting on Barack Obama when Barack Obama was the one that went after and finally killed Osama bin Laden, who orchestrated the largest and most deadliest attack on the U.S. homeland since Pearl Harbor. And we didn't have any terrorist attacks under Barack Obama. So I'll take issue with them on that. And regarding Trump's post on Truth Social, he's absolutely wrong. This was a homegrown terrorist. We have many homegrown terrorists. We have many people that get radicalized either by ISIS or by white supremacists and then go on and implement terrorist attacks on the U.S. homeland. So this is a problem that has existed for decades now. I wouldn't allude it to any one president, rather that the advent of social media and the internet has brought these radical ideas into people's living rooms and their laptops, and people that are susceptible to this type of inflammatory rhetoric, suicidal rhetoric in many cases, become radicalized and often carry out these horrific attacks. So I wouldn't blame any president in that regard, but rather the internet being so widespread and prolific as it is. And obviously, this guy was homegrown, so this has nothing to do with illegal immigration, at least not this attack. Maybe there'll be an attack in the future that he could try in on that, but this was homegrown, U.S.-born terrorists that was radicalized on the internet. And if we're going to talk about it and we want to talk about solutions, we need to start there.
Rafael, let me go there, because the Associated Press back in October actually investigated this sort of thing. They found more than 480 people with military backgrounds who've been accused of ideologically driven extremist crimes from 2017 to 2023. That, of course, not mentioning what we just witnessed in New Orleans. 230 of them were arrested in connection with the January 6th riot at the Capitol. It certainly appears that this attacker was radicalized online. This seems to be a serious issue. Is this something you think Congress is going to delve into? Are there solutions for something like this?
It's complicated. It's true. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but most terrorism in the United States has been homegrown and has been ideological. Sometimes, yes, with ISIS inspiration. This is not the first time that happens. But there's one statistic that I always remember. In the last half century, people who came into this country illegally, of the terrorists who came into this country illegally, they have murdered exactly 0 people on U.S. soil. There has never been a U.S. citizen or national or anyone in the United States killed by somebody who crossed the border illegally. There have been ideological attacks. During Trump's presidency, there was a Walmart attack in El Paso that was viewed by many as terrorism. It was certainly ideological and racist. So can Congress do something about it? It's unlikely, given that this was happening during Trump's presidency, before Trump's presidency. It's clearly happening now at the end of Joe Biden's presidency, and Congress hasn't really known what to do about it.
And Jadan, we're already seeing the fallout from these attacks. In fact, the district attorney down in New Orleans is saying that this is going to be just like 9/11. There are going to be big changes. If you want to go to a big event, you're going to see a lot of security at all kinds of large-scale events, and people are just going to have to get used to it. Does he have a point?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Mike, thank you for having me, and Happy New Year to each of these panelists. And, I hope that one of our New Year's resolutions is that our government and our law enforcement agencies actually take seriously when they are informed that there's potential for attacks. Because what I really want to say here is that, we can blame culture. Culture is important, but the political process and our administration is responsible for the safety of the American people. And what we've seen over the last 7 months is a litany of attacks, whether it was politically motivated assassination attempts, 2 of them against the incoming president, or these 2 attacks. And what we can understand from that is our law enforcement agencies appear to have their eyes off the ball. We know that under the last 4 years and under the previous administration, they focused on observant traditional Catholics. They focused on parents going and objecting at school boards. And apparently they have not focused on homegrown radicals, whether it was by, radical Islamic terrorism or some other, anti-political factor. And I think we really need to separate some facts here. Homegrown terrorism or imported terrorism is certainly different than crime or murder that can occur from, an illegal immigrant or legal immigrant. The president, in his inartful tweet, as usual, initially blamed what appeared to say immigration, but rather he said crime. And I think he gets to wiggle out on that one, because certainly we know that crime has been committed and murders have been committed by illegal immigrants. But in this case, what I really see is a wholesale indictment of our law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies. And I really hope that Congress investigates and finds out why they are continually dropping the ball. And each of these attacks could have been much worse. And the question really becomes, what is going to be done to make sure that they're held accountable so that they keep the American people safe?
Interesting points. Rafael, shifting gears just a bit, immigration, obviously top of mind for the Trump presidency. He'll start in the next 3 weeks. He's vowed to round up roughly 11 million undocumented migrants. There's a report out from the American Immigration Council, that's an immigration rights research and policy firm. They say that deporting just 1 million undocumented immigrants will come with a price tag of $88 billion. And they take those numbers and kind of extend it out for a decade. They say it's going to be about $1 trillion to do that. You know, we have so many budget struggles here. How do you pay for something like this?
Well, the short answer is you don't. And if you take the Trump administration is coming in promising to cut is it $2 trillion from the federal budget. The country already spends about $400 billion, pardon me, on immigration enforcement every year among a litany of agencies. To add to that would go against their budgetary principles, but their main promise, the MAGA's main promise, is to reduce and discourage further immigration through more enforcement that presumably would deter people from coming here. So those two principles are going to come into conflict necessarily. How they will resolve this conflict, whether they will say immigration enforcement is a priority regardless of the budget, that is one possible outcome of this conflict. But we will see sort of the economic and the ideological, you know, just simply come into conflict.
Yeah, and Eric, you know, as we look at this, the incoming border czar has said that he's not opposed to detention centers. He's also saying that, you know, if you're a parent of a dreamer, you can get deported, you can go with your family. I mean, it seems like a kind of a hardline approach. How quickly do you think Trump is going to move on this, and what does it look like?
Well, first of all, before we jump into this, may I just correct Doug? Doug, love you, brother, but just off the top of my head, during Barack Obama's term, I remember San Bernardino murder, 14 people, I think, were killed by a radicalized Muslim. I remember Emmanuel AME Church in South Carolina. And I also remember a synagogue in Pittsburgh being shot up by someone who was radicalized as well. So to say nothing happened under Barack Obama, kind of BS. I just had to bring that out there. As far as immigrant,
very quickly, that wasn't what I said. I said foreign terrorists, or allow me to
but you went ahead
and qualify that. Foreign terrorist attacks, like 9/11.
These two terrorists in New Orleans and Las Vegas aren't foreign; they were radicalized, and that's the problem.
No,
we have an open southern border that for 4 years let in anywhere between 9 and 12 million illegals, and many hundreds, if not thousands, of people on the United States terror watch list. Whether these people perpetrate the crime or radicalize people here, young men typically who are disillusioned with society, they're very vulnerable to be radicalized by people who could come over. Obviously, if Islam radical Islam is smart, they'll send a bunch of people through our southern border, not perpetrate the crime themselves, but radicalize young, disturbed men who will go and commit mass murder. That's the way it happens.
Eric, that's not how it's happening. Eric, that's not how it's happening. It's happening online. We're not seeing what you just said. We're not seeing those foreign terror entities bring people in through the border and commit terror attacks or radicalize young men. They're all being radicalized via the internet, either through white nationalists or white supremacist groups or through foreign terror groups. So that's where the real battle lies, is online. Right now, you and I are operating online through social media, through cameras and everything, and coming into people's living rooms. That is where the real battle lies. We have to find some type of way, unfortunately, maybe to regulate people online, because we are seeing these people become radicalized online. And both you and I want to stop that. We want to attack that problem. Find it where it exists online.
Online radicalization is one way to stop it, but also halting this illegal immigration situation where hundreds of thousands, maybe tens of thousands of potential terrorists or radical jihadists coming over to help radicalize disturbed young Americans to perpetrate some of these crimes. Neither one of us know yet, but to say it never happened under Obama, that is just categorically false. It's the same thing that all of a sudden is happening again. It took a break for 4 years. And Mike, you point out January 6th, that wasn't a terror attack. That was some crazy people storming the Capitol, creating a lot of damage. That wasn't a terror attack. No one died there other than a heart attack.
That's not true. You said Ashley Babbitt died, and that essentially was a terror attack. I mean, I would go so far as to say that was worse than a terror attack. That was an attack on our very democratic systems within the U.S. Congress to move forward with the validation of the election. That was more dangerous than a terror attack had they stopped that. That would have been much more dangerous. So, you know, that was just as bad, homegrown terrorism. And I was alluding to foreign terrorism when I said there were no attacks under Barack Obama. Foreign terrorism, but homegrown terrorism, we simply haven't been able to stop that.
Rafael, let me get back to the issue of migrants. You know, I was looking at the numbers. These workers, this workforce, accounts for about 2.6 of the U.S. GDP, 2.6%. You're going to talk about billions of dollars in tax revenue that's going to go away, Social Security payments, all of that sort of thing. A former Republican Senator, John McCain in Arizona, famously asked an audience who was very upset about this very issue, I'll give any of you $50 an hour to go out and pick lettuce in Yuma for an entire season. He didn't get many takers. If these people are deported, who takes these jobs? These are tough jobs. They're very physical. They're not jobs that pay a lot, and people in the United States just are not interested in these jobs.
So there's a big misnomer, and it's this idea of unskilled labor. So when you give out visas, the sort of the agricultural visas versus the visas for people with college degrees, when the law says unskilled labor, they mean you don't have a college degree. That doesn't actually mean that it doesn't take a specific skill. The example I always come back to is the dairy industry. When you have a dairy farm, those animals need 24-hour, 7-day-a-week care. You don't milk the cows for one day and you have a serious problem, they might start dying off. There are not enough people in this country who know how to do that work, who can be trained in short order to do that work, and who presumably would want to do that work. But that one is really a matter of opinion. You can convince anyone to do anything, but can you train them quick enough? So the dairy industry pushes very aggressively to be able to keep their workers, both those who are on temporary visas and those who are here illegally, because they just don't have a replacement. And you know that's the most extreme example, but it sort of repeats itself. You see it in produce, you see it in meat packing, you see it in hospitality even. So the answer is, if you do get rid of that entire workforce, or you put enough fear into that entire workforce that they go underground, nobody that's proposing to do that has offered an economic alternative that would not destroy everybody else's economy. Whether it exists, well, it's obviously up to whoever's proposing mass deportations to propose how you conduct mass deportations without that economic harm.
Yeah, Jadan, let me ask you about another form of visas, these H-1B temporary worker visas. That's become kind of a firestorm within the Republican Party. You see Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy on one side, you see Steve Bannon on the other. Seems like there's a fissure where maybe the MAGA supporters very unhappy about this, and yet you see the people from the tech world saying, no, it's very important. How do you see that thing playing out?
Yeah, I think this whole immigration argument is really interesting because we're finding that immigration has odd bedfellows. You know, the argument essentially for the previous, agricultural immigrants that you spoke about is essentially indentured servitude and a market that has had essentially free labor or subsidized labor subsidizing our grocery prices in the United States. Conversely, on the high-end side or the high-skilled side, we have H-1B essentially holding down labor costs for American IT workers. So the question really becomes, within the Republican Party, and I think especially within the MAGA movement, really what do they want first? Because in politics, it's the art of compromise. You're not going to get everything. And I think the maximalist approach, those seeking to have an Americans first immigration policy are gonna either have to take on billionaires in tech or really the agribusiness billionaires. And I think likely we're going to go the illegal immigration, unskilled labor first. And there's going to be a bit of swallowing on the side of the hardcore in the movement. But this question really is that our economy is predicated on indentured servitude.
Well,
and that really should be the question we all ask ourselves in terms of how our prices are structured.
Jadan, good points. It's interesting. We're kind of running out of time. And before we leave this conversation, I wanted to talk a little bit about former President Jimmy Carter, who passed away at the age of 100. I had the opportunity to interview him about a decade ago in Atlanta, Georgia. He was very lively, engaged. We talked about a range of subjects. He was very on top of things. He only served one term, but I want to get some thoughts on his legacy. And Eric, why don't I start with you?
Sure. Very quickly, just the last question. MAGA is very. I represent a lot of these guys. MAGA is very consistent. America first, whether it's tech, Silicon Valley tech, or workers in the fields. They want Americans in those jobs. If it costs more, so be it. As far as Jimmy Carter, Mike, my honest opinion is, and I've been doing this a really long time, one of the best humanitarians the country has ever had. Also, probably the worst president. Maybe Biden will compete with that as the worst president the country had as well. I know he's just recently passed, but I just have to be honest and truthful. That's my transparent opinion of Jimmy Carter.
Douglas, I'll give you a chance to chime in as well.
Obviously, I disagree with Eric in that regard. I do not feel that he was one of the worst presidents that we've seen, especially after we all lived through George W. Bush and how he wrecked the economy and allowed 9/11 to happen on his watch. But so much of Jimmy Carter's legacy was after he left the White House. One of the great humanitarians. He definitely put his money where his mouth was, and he said he wanted to help people. And that's exactly what he did. He went out and physically built houses into his 90s. He donated to so many humanitarian programs and causes, and he just really cannot be defined by his presidency, but by what he did throughout his life. He was a decorated war veteran, Navy, I believe it was World War II. He was in the Navy, and this was really one of the greatest people to ever grace the walls or the doors of the White House in terms of being a humanitarian and just a great person.
Rafael, I'm going to give you the last word on this one.
Well, a lot is said about Jimmy Carter's presidency, about his post-presidency. That was half his life. But the half of his life before his presidency is also quite interesting. He was a nuclear engineer for the Navy. He once rappelled into an open nuclear facility at great risk to himself to prevent some kind of nuclear incident from happening. So, like, very rounded, very interesting character. And I think Washington has more of a soft spot for him now from his passing.
Absolutely. I want to thank all of our guests for being on the broadcast. It was a great discussion, and that's going to do it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for watching.